Hello guys, welcome to our channel. So today we are going to continue with our O-level massive revisions. So today we are having this question paper. This is November 2025. So this is a question paper that was written this year, and this is for paper 1 multiple choice combined science, and this is for 1 hour for O-level, and this boy is Zimsec. Okay, so just to make it a habit that whenever you are sitting for exams, you just read this instruction to candidates, because these are of essential importance to you whenever you are sitting for exams. So the first instruction is saying, do not open this booklet until you are told to do so. So just wait until you are told to open your booklet, okay? And in this question paper, we are required to answer all questions, and there are 40 questions in this paper. And for each question, there are 4 possible answers, and this one is obvious. We are going to have 4 options for each and every question: option A, option B, and option C, and option D. Okay, so we are required to choose the one we consider correct, and we should record it using a soft pencil on the separate answer sheet. So read very carefully the instructions on the answer sheet. Okay, so there are also some instructions on the answer sheet, how you share your candidate number. So just make sure that you follow these instructions very carefully. They are very important also. Okay, so let us dive into our question paper, and we are on number 1. So the question is saying, the diagram shows a plant cell which part maintains the shape of the plant cell. So we're having this plant cell. Why and how can we see deduce that this is a plant cell, given that we were not told that this is a plant cell? Okay, this is the first question you might be asked in the structured question papers. You might be asked, what type of a cell is this one? So you should know the features of a plant cell. Okay, so the reason why this is a plant cell, it is because it is a cell wall. So animal cells doesn't have a cell wall, so it is only a plant cell that have a cell wall. Okay, so whenever you are answering a multiple choice question paper, you use elimination method. So elimination method is to eliminate answers that you see these answers are obviously wrong. Okay, so for example, this number 1, we are asked that which part maintains the shape of the plant cell. So obviously D cannot maintain the shape of the plant cell, because D is what? It is chloroplast. Okay, so we can simply eliminate option D. So we are now left with option C, option B, and option A. And this option A cannot also maintain the shape of the plant cell, because this one, it is a vacuum. Okay, so this option A, it is also wrong, and we are now left with option B and option C. So what is option B? Option B is the cell membrane. So cell membrane doesn't maintain the shape of the cell. So the only feature on the plant cell that maintains the shape of the plant cell, it is the cell wall. The cell wall. So we have also eliminated this. So our final answer in this case is option C. Okay, so for number 1, our final answer is option C. And then let us move on to the next part of our question paper, number 2. So the number 2 is saying, by which process does water enter root hair cell? So here we are having a specialized cell. So this one, it is a root hair cell, and we are having 4 processes: the one for option A, the other one for option B, the other one for option C, and the last one for option D. And if we are to use our elimination method, you can simply eliminate option D, which is saying translocation, because translocation, it doesn't have anything to do with the process where water enters the root hair cell. Okay, so we are now left with option C, option B, and option A. So we also need to define each and every term here in our answers. So we can start by defining what is osmosis. So osmosis, it is a process of it is the movement of water molecules from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration through a semi-permeable membrane. Okay, so it is the movement of water molecules from a region of higher concentration. It is the higher concentration of water molecules, and it is also the lower concentration of water molecules. Okay, and for option B, diffusion, it is the movement of particles. So it can be gases. So the movement of it is the movement of particles from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration down a concentration gradient. Okay, so osmosis, it is a special type of diffusion, because osmosis, it is the movement of water molecules only down a concentration gradient. So a concentration gradient, it is from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. So we are having a higher concentration to a lower concentration movement for osmosis, and we are also having a higher concentration to a low concentration movement for diffusion. But the difference between osmosis and diffusion, it is that diffusion, it is for particles, and then osmosis, it is for water molecules. Okay, and then active uptake. active uptake, it is the movement of particles from a region of lower concentration to a region of higher concentration against concentration gradient using energy. So the major difference between option A, B, and C. So if we want to differentiate option A, B to option C, we can say that option A and B, the movement, it is the movement of water molecules if we are talking about osmosis, and it is the movement of particles if we are talking about diffusion. But what is common here, it is the movement down the concentration gradient for osmosis and diffusion. But for active uptake, it is against concentration gradient. So that is the difference between these three processes. So the question is saying, by which process does water enter root to your cell? So we are talking about water, and water, it is more concentrated in the soil than in the root to your cell. So water, it is flowing from the soil to the root down the concentration gradient. So we can simply eliminate option C for that reason, because water is flowing down the concentration gradient. And we can also eliminate option B because we are talking of water here. So we can also eliminate option B. So our final answer is option A, osmosis. Okay. And let us move on to the next question, which says, which instrument is used to measure the rate of transpiration? So what is transpiration? So here, transpiration is our keyword in this question. So we need to take care of this word, and we need also to define what is transpiration. So transpiration, it is water is lost from the plant through the leaves, through the cells, or through the stomata. But the opening and the closing of stomata, it is guided, or it is maintained or operated through the cells, which we call guide cells or stomata cells. Okay, so transpiration, the rate of transpiration can be measured using so for option A, we are having a barometer. So baro means pressure, so this is obviously wrong because we are not measuring pressure. Okay, so we can also eliminate option B because this one, manometer, doesn't measure the rate of transpiration. And let us move on to the next question. So here we are on question number 4. So the question is saying the diagram shows part of the carbon cycle. So which process A, B, C, or D is representing photosynthesis? Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to define what is photosynthesis. So photosynthesis, it is the process whereby green plants manufacture their own food using carbon dioxide from air and water, in the presence of water, to form oxygen and carbohydrates. Okay, so we need water plus carbon dioxide to give us what? To give us starch and also oxygen. Okay, so these two, or you can say, you can say glucose, so because it is the most appropriate answer here. So it is glucose. Okay, so these are the reactants, and these are the products of the photosynthesis process. So photosynthesis, we are manufacturing the food, and the food here, in this case, it is glucose, using carbon dioxide and water to produce the food, glucose, and oxygen as a product. Okay, so oxygen is the product of photosynthesis, but it is the reactant during the respiration process. So you need to understand the difference between respiration and photosynthesis, because the reactants in the photosynthesis process are the products in the respiration process. Okay, so in this case, we are required to state the process A, B, C, or D, the process that is representing photosynthesis. So we have managed to define what is photosynthesis. So we are now left with just marking the process, or the arrow that is representing the photosynthesis process. Okay, so let us start with this arrow A. So this arrow A is from green plants to what? To animals. So this is feeding. This is feeding of what? Of animals. So this is not an photosynthesis process. So we can simply eliminate option A. And this option here, this arrow here, from animals to carbon compounds in atmosphere, carbon dioxide in atmosphere, this process here is what we call respiration. Okay, because when we respire, we exhale carbon dioxide as a byproduct. Okay, and then for this arrow C, from fuels to carbon compounds in atmosphere, this one, it is combustion, because when we burn fuels, we produce carbon dioxide and water. So carbon dioxide, it is the carbon compound that we form when we burn fuels in the presence of oxygen. So this is combustion, not photosynthesis. So we can simply eliminate option C also. Okay, and we are now left with this arrow D and this arrow B. And then for arrow D, we are having an arrow from the green plants to fuel. So this is decomposition or decaying. So we can write decaying of what? Of green plants. So when green plants decay, they produce fuels such as coal, charcoal, and so forth. So this option D, it is wrong, so you can simply eliminate it. Okay, so we are now left with option B. So option B, it is now from carbon compounds in the atmosphere to green plants. Okay, so carbon compounds in the atmosphere, in the, let us say, this is what the compound, it is carbon dioxide. So when carbon dioxide goes into the green plants, this process, it is what we call photosynthesis. Okay, so this is the photosynthesis process. So our correct answer for this question number 4, it is option B. Okay, and let us move on to the next question number 5, which says which statement describes the structure of a blood capillary? So we have 3 blood vessels, we have artery, and we also have veins, we can also have capillaries. There are many types of arteries. We have ulnar artery, radial artery, aorta. So the major one, it is aorta. So what you must know about arteries is that arteries, they always carry oxygenated blood, except for pulmonary artery. So this is exceptional for arteries to say pulmonary artery, it is the only artery that carries deoxygenated blood. From what? It carries deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs. So it is pulmonary artery. Okay, and then for veins, we have basilic veins. We can also have pulmonary veins. We also have vena cava. Okay, so under veins, we can say it's vena cava. Okay, so under veins, what you also need to know is that veins, they always carry deoxygenated blood, except for pulmonary vein, which carries oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart. Okay, so arteries, they carry oxygenated blood, except for what? So there's exceptional, is except for pulmonary what? Pulmonary artery. Okay, and then for veins, they carry let me use this color. So veins, they carry deoxygenated blood, except for what? Except for pulmonary vein. And there's also structures like arteries are thick than veins, and veins, they have a valve to prevent backflow. You can talk of pressure, that the pressure in arteries is greater than the pressure in veins. But you also have what we call capillaries. Okay, so capillaries, they are very small as compared to arteries and veins. They are small in size and they are 1 cell thick. So in capillaries, this is where we can find blood, not blood, but it's what? Gaseous exchange with the alveoli. Okay, so it is gaseous exchange with what? With the alveoli. Okay, so gaseous exchange takes place in the capillaries. Why? In capillaries, because they are 1 cell thick. So they are very, very thin, and gas particles or gas molecules can easily pass through capillaries, so can have gaseous exchange. Okay, so in this question, we were required to give a statement which describes the structure of the blood capillary. So option A is saying it contains valves. So it's this one is wrong, because the valves are contained in veins. So this one is wrong, and it is 1 cell thick. Obviously this is correct for capillaries. So option B is wrong, but we can also explain why option C and D is wrong. Okay, option B is correct, but we can also explain why option C and D is wrong. So option C, it is saying it is a wide lumen. So a wide lumen, it is for what? For veins. So wide lumen is for veins, and small lumen, it is for what? For arteries. Why small lumen for arteries? To increase pressure, and why small lumen for veins? To reduce pressure. Okay, and then so we can eliminate this, and then option D, it is a thick elastic layer. Thick elastic layer, it is for what? For arteries, and then thin elastic layer is for what? It is for veins. Why thick elastic layer for arteries? To withstand high pressures. And why a thin elastic layer for veins? There's no need of thick elastic layer for veins, because the pressure is very, very, very low as compared to the pressure in arteries. So option D, it is wrong. So we are now left with option B, meaning to say our correct answer for number 5, it is option B, which is saying it is a 1 cell thick. And let us move on to the next question, question number 6. So the question number 6 is saying the digestion of proteins produces. Alright, so for option A, it's glucose, and then option B is glycerol, option C it's amino acids, and option D it's fatty acids. Okay, so the question is saying the digestion of proteins produces what? So it's either producing glucose, glycerol, amino acids, or fatty acids. Okay, so glucose, it is the end product of digestion of starch. So this one is obviously wrong. Option A is obviously wrong. And you can move on to option C. This one is for fats. Glycerol is for fats. And then amino acids, this one is for protein. So option C is correct. But option D is wrong because of fatty acids. These are the end products of what? Of the digestion of fats, okay, or lipids. So number 6, our final answer is option C. Okay. And let us move on to number 9. Because number 8 it's not it's number 8, so let us move on to number 8 because number 7 it's not clear. So number 8 is saying the food web, in the food web the lizard is. So the option A, it is saying the lizard is a carnivore, the lizard is a herbivore, the lizard is an omnivore, or the lizard is a decomposer. So we are having this food web here, and the lizard, it's here. This is our lizard, and as you can see here, this one, the lizard can eat this one, and it can also eat this one. So this can eliminate option B, because this thing here, it's not a herb, meaning to say lizard can't be a herbivore. Okay, and then as you can see, these two are animals, these two. So we can't say this is an omnivore, because as you can see, the lizard is only eating meat. So we can also eliminate option what? C, and obviously lizard can't be a decomposer. So option D is also eliminated. So we are now left with option A. So our final answer is option A. It is a carnivore. Okay, and let us move on to number 9. So the question number 9 is saying which sequence correctly shows the flow of energy in an ecosystem. So option A, it is saying sun, secondary consumer, primary consumer, and producer. Or for option B, he's saying it's secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, producer to sun. Option C is saying producer, primary consumer, tertiary consumer to sun. And then option D is saying sun, producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer. So we can simply eliminate option C and B because we can't end with the sun. Okay, and then for option A, it's now the secondary, it's sun to the secondary consumer. So we can't start with the secondary consumer before our primary consumer. So option A, it's wrong. So our final answer for number 9 is option D. It's from the sun, and the producer, the plants, will produce food in the form of glucose and then be stored as starch through the process of photosynthesis, obtaining energy from the sun, the solar energy. Okay, and then the primary consumers, we can talk of goats. Okay, the goats will eat these plants, and then they obtain the chemical energy from the plants. And then the secondary consumer, we can talk of hyenas. Okay, or human beings. These are the secondary consumer. They are eating the goats, and they are also obtaining the chemical energy. So producers, they convert the solar energy or the light energy from the sun into chemical energy. Okay, so let us move on to the next question, and the question number 10. So the question is saying which substance builds up in muscles as a result of anaerobic respiration. So the key word here is anaerobic respiration. So we have two different types of respirations. We have aerobic respiration, and also we have anaerobic respiration. Okay, so aerobic respiration, it is the chemical breaking down of glucose in the presence of oxygen to produce energy and carbon dioxide. Okay, so here we are reacting glucose in the presence of oxygen, or we are burning. So we can visualize respiration like the process of combustion, like we are burning glucose in the presence of oxygen to produce carbon dioxide and water plus energy. So there's a high amount of energy produced. There's a high amount of energy produced during the aerobic respiration, and there is a very low amount of energy produced during the anaerobic respiration. And the products here is carbon dioxide plus what? Plus water, and a lot of what? A lot of energy. So energy is also product of respiration. In the products here for anaerobic respiration, we have lactic acid. So anaerobic respiration, it is the reaction between carbon dioxide, not carbon dioxide but glucose. So it's chemical breaking down of glucose in the absence of oxygen to produce lactic acid and very low amount of energy. So anaerobic respiration occurs when we are having excessive training session, like running 100 meters. So when we are sprinting, we have a limited source of oxygen, so because the rate of converting glucose into form of energy plus carbon dioxide and water, it is very high as compared to the supply of oxygen. Okay, so we end up respiring anaerobically. Okay, so the major product of anaerobic respiration, obviously, it is option C. So option C is correct. You can eliminate option A because oxygen is not a product of anaerobic respiration. Neither is it a product of aerobic respiration, but it is a reactant for aerobic respiration. Okay, ethanol is not a product, and carbon dioxide is not a product for aerobic respiration, because we are having a limited supply of what? Of oxygen. And let us move on to number 11, which says which condition is mainly caused by tobacco smoking. So liver cirrhosis, and it is not caused by tobacco smoking, but it is caused by drinking of alcohol. So this liver cirrhosis, it is caused by drinking of alcohol, and the correct answer for number 11 is option B. And we can eliminate these ones and the damaged muscles. Okay, so tobacco can't damage muscles. And let us move on to number 12. So number 12 is saying the release of a mature ovule from the ovary into the oviduct takes place during. So this one, it can be menstruation. Obviously, it can be menstruation, and it can be fertilization, because for fertilization, it will be after the release of the ovule, so it can be the release of the ovule. Okay, so this option B, it's obviously wrong. And then for option C, it's not implantation. It is now a fertilized ovule, so option C, it's wrong. So we are now left with option D, the ovulation. And let us move on to number 13, which says which one is a sign of puberty in girls. So using our elimination method, you can simply see that option D is wrong, because in girls there is no depending of voice. This is the sign of puberty in boys, not in girls. So this option D is obviously wrong. And then for option C is saying the development of bed. So the development of bed, it is what? It is for boys. And then the broadening of shoulders, it is also for boys. So our final answer, it is option A, the widening of pelvic girdle. So this one, it is the development of what? Of hips. So this is our final answer for number 13. And then let us move on to number 14. So for number 14, we are told that which disease is a waterborne. So we have waterborne diseases, we have sexually transmitted diseases, we have also airborne diseases. Okay, so in this case, we are required to choose among these options a waterborne disease. So malaria is not a waterborne disease. Herpes is a sexually transmitted disease, and Ebola is not a waterborne disease. So obviously, our correct answer is bilharzia. Okay, and let us move on to the next question, number 15, which says which is the best method used to separate two liquids which have different densities. So we have several types of methods to separate substances, like we have filtration, we have distillation, there's also fractional distillation, there's decanting, there's a winnowing, there's magnetism, and so forth. Okay, so in this case, we want a separating method which we can use to separate two liquids of different densities. So the keywords are two liquids and of what? Different densities. Okay, so what is density? So density, it is mass per unit volume. And if we are having two liquids of two different densities, the one with a higher density will be at the bottom. So let us say the one in this color, it is the denser one, okay? And then the other one, the less denser one, will be above the denser one. So this is the principle of flotation. If we are doing physics, we can talk of Archimedes' principle, talking of the relationship of density and flotation, okay? So given that this one in this color is less denser as compared to this one. So a good example, it is cooking oil and water. So cooking oil is less denser than water. So obviously cooking oil will float above water. So the best method to separate cooking oil from water is to decant the cooking oil. So we decant the cooking oil, and we can't use the filtration because these two are liquids, and this option A is wrong. And then we can also use distillation, because we only use distillation when we are having two liquids of different boiling points. So the difference here, it is the difference in densities. So option C is wrong. So we are now left with option what? Option D. So our final answer is option D. Okay, and let us move on to the next question, and it's question number 16. So the question is saying, what is the purpose of liquid white? So this is paper chromatograph, and we are having dyes. This is ink, and it starts to separate on the paper. So we are having this liquid white. So the first option is saying to give color to the dyes. This one is obviously wrong, because the dyes will give the color even without this liquid white, okay? And then to separate the dyes, so this is the most appropriate answer for this question. The idea of this liquid is to separate the dyes. And then option C is saying to provide a sweet scent, and this one is it's wrong. And then option D is saying to make paper wet. This is wrong, okay? And we are now on number 17. So the number 17 is saying, which diagram A, B, C, or D shows the electronic configuration of a chlorine atom, the proton number 17 and the mass number 37. Okay, so proton number, it is the number of what? The number of electrons and the number of protons. So for a electrically neutral atom, the number of electrons, it is equal to the number of protons. So in this case, we are having an electrically neutral chlorine atom, meaning to say if we are having 17 protons, we also have 17 what? Electrons. Okay, and mass number, it consists of protons plus neutrons. Okay, so it consists of protons and neutrons. So given that we are having 17 protons, we can simply calculate the number of neutrons to say it is now 37 minus 17. So if we subtract 17 from 37, we get 20. So the number of neutrons in an electrically neutral chlorine atom, it is 20, and the number of electrons is 17, the number of protons is 17. But in this case, we were asked to show the diagram with the electronic configuration of chlorine. Okay, so chlorine has what? 17 electrons. So we are searching for a diagram with 17 electrons with the correct electronic configuration. So the correct electronic configuration is what? Is that we start with the 2 electrons and then 8. Okay, so it's 17 electrons, so it's 2, 8, and this gives us what? 10. And after 10, we can talk of what? 7, because there are 17 electrons. So the outermost shell, or the valence shell of this chlorine atom, must have 7 electrons. So it's now 2, 4, 6, 7 for option A. But if we calculate the total number of electrons for option A, it's 7 plus 2, which is 9. So this is wrong for this question, because this electron configuration is not for chlorine, but it's for fluorine. So option A, it's wrong. And then let us move on to the next option, B. So option B, it's what? 2, 4, 6, 7, and 2, 4. So this is wrong. Why? Because it is having 2, 4. So it's 4 electrons in the inner shell instead of 8. So option B is wrong. And let us move on to option C. So here we are having 2, 4, 6, 7, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 2, 4. So this one is 2, 8, 7. So option C is correct, because the valence shell is having 7 electrons, the inner shell is having 8 electrons, and the most inner shell is having 2 electrons. Okay, so our correct answer is option C. And let us move on to number 18. So number 18 is saying the element carbon exists as carbon with 6 electrons or 6 proton number and 12 mass number. And again, it can also exist with 6 proton number and 14 mass number. Okay, so the question is saying the 2 carbon atoms have the same number of electrons. So the 2 carbon electrons they have 6 proton number and 6 proton number, and we know that proton number, it is the number of protons, and for an electrically neutral atom the number of protons is equal to the number of electrons. So meaning to say these 2 isotopes, this is the first carbon and this next carbon here, they are having the same number of electrons. So our final answer is option A, but you can also analyze option B to say the same number of neutrons. So if we are having different mass number, and for the first isotope the mass number is 12, and we know that mass number, it is the sum of the number of protons plus the number of what? The number of neutrons. So if the number of neutrons is 6 and the mass number is 12, so it's 12 plus x. So you can say the number of neutrons is x, therefore x is equal to 12 minus 6, which is what? 6. So the number of neutrons for the first isotope, it is 6, and the number of neutrons for the second isotope, it is 14 minus 6, which is equal to what? To 8. So they have different number of neutrons. So option B is wrong. And then let us move on to option C, which is saying they have different number of protons. So the proton number is the same, 6 and 6. So this one is wrong because they have the same number of protons. And then for option D is saying the different chemical properties. So chemical properties, they are affected by the number of electrons. And if we are having the same proton number 6, 6, and the proton number is the number of protons in an atom, and the number of protons in an electrically neutral atom, it is equal to the number of electrons, meaning to say we are having the same number of electrons for the first isotope and the second isotope, and the chemical properties are the same for the first isotope and the second isotope. So this option D is wrong. And we are now on number 19. So number 19 is saying which statement correctly describes covalent compounds. Okay, so option A is saying they are soluble in water. So examples of covalent compounds, we have water, we have sulfur dioxide, we can talk of what? Carbon dioxide, and etc. And we should also define what is a covalent bond, because we obtain covalent compound from a covalent bond. So a covalent bond, it is an electrostatic force of attraction between a shared pair of electrons in the nuclei of the 2 or more bonding atoms. Okay, so given that we are having a covalent bond between hydrogen and oxygen to form water, so it's now oxygen, and we're having hydrogen here and hydrogen here. This is hydrogen, this is hydrogen. Okay, yeah, like this. So the idea of bonding is so that this oxygen here, we have a stable octet electronic configuration. In this hydrogen here, we have a stable duplet electronic configuration. So duplet, it is an outermost shell with 2 electrons like helium, and then an octet, it is an outermost shell with the 8 electrons just like neon and argon. Okay, so covalent bond, it is the electrostatic force of attraction between this shared pair of electrons, because we are sharing an electron from oxygen and an electron from hydrogen. So the electrostatic force of attraction between this shared pair of electrons and the nucleus here, the nucleuses of these bonding atoms. So we know that in the nucleus there are positive charges because of protons. Protons are positively charged, and around the shells we have electrons. So electrons, they orbit around the shells. So electrons, they are negatively charged, and protons, they are positively charged. So, and according to Coulomb's law, we understand that positive charges, they attract, and unlike charges, they repel. Okay, so if we are having 2 protons, they will repel, and a proton and electron, they attract. So the attraction between these electrons in the nuclei, it is due to the opposite charges. Nucleus, it is positively charged, and the shared pair of electrons, they are negatively charged. Okay, and so this is covalent bonding. So we can also talk of ionic bonding. So ionic bonding, it is the electrostatic force of attraction between a a positively charged ion or a cation, and a negatively charged ion or an anion. Okay, so it is not the reaction between a metal and a non-metal, but it is the force of attraction between a positive charge. Like when we are forming sodium chloride, it's not the reaction between sodium and chlorine, but it is the force of attraction between the sodium ion plus the chloride ion. So the reaction is between the ions. So you should take note of that we are reacting ions. So the ionic bonding, it is the force of attraction, and you should take note of this. All types of bonding, be it metallic bonding, ionic bonding, or covalent bonding, they are all electrostatic forces of attraction. So if we are defining a covalent bond, we have said that it is an electrostatic force of attraction between a shared pair of electron and the nuclei of the two or more bonding atoms. And then for ionic bonding, it is the electrostatic force of attraction between the cation and the anion. And then for metallic bonding, it is the electrostatic force of attraction between a sea of delocalized electrons and a lattice of positive ions. So all these types of bonding, they are all electrostatic forces of attraction. Okay, so for combined science, we have two major types of bonding. We have ionic bonding, and we also have covalent bonding. Okay, so they are properties of ionic compounds, and they are also properties of covalent compounds. But in this question, we're asked to describe correctly the properties of a covalent compound. So the first property is they are soluble in water, and we know that covalent compounds, they are not soluble in water, so this is obviously wrong. And option B is saying they conduct electricity. So the conduction of electricity for ionic compounds, it is due to the movement of ions. So it is due to the mobility of ions. So that's why we say ionic compounds and solid states, they cannot conduct electricity. Why? Because ions, they are not mobile, or they are not free to carry charge. So the reason why ions, they are free to carry charge in aqueous solution or in molten states, it is due to the mobility of these ions, the sodium ion and the chloride ion, if we are using sodium chloride. And then there's also conduction of electricity in the metals due to the mobility of the delocalized electrons. So if we are talking about metals, we can talk of the mobility of the delocalized electrons. But if we are talking about ionic, we can talk of the mobility of ions. Okay, so this one is wrong for covalent bonds, because covalent bonds, they are not free to carry charge. The molecules, they are not free to carry charge, and there is no delocalized electrons for this covalent compound. Okay, but there's exception for graphite, because graphite, it is a covalent compound, and there are two types of covalent compounds. They what we call simple molecular structures, where we have water, sulfur dioxide, and carbon dioxide. And there's another special group of covalent compounds, which we call giant molecular structures. And giant molecular structures, under giant molecular structures, we have graphite, and we also have diamond, and we also have silicon dioxide. So it's silicon dioxide here. Okay, so there's exception for all covalent compounds being non-conductors due to graphite. So graphite, it can conduct electricity due to the delocalized electrons along the layers. And then these three compounds here, they have a very, very high melting point. So they are very different from other covalent compounds. And then now we can move to option C, which is saying they are generally low melting point. So in this case, the covalent compounds that are being referred to, these are the simple molecular structures. So we can simply say option C is correct, to say they have generally low melting point. Okay, and then for option D, it is saying they are usually solid at room temperature. So water is not solid, sulfur dioxide is a gas, carbon dioxide is a gas. So all simple molecular structures are not solid at room temperatures. So we can also eliminate this one. But there is also exceptions, just like I've said, for giant molecular structures, just like graphite, diamond, and silicon oxide. Okay, and let us move on to number 20. So number 20 is saying which one is the correct formula for calculating concentration. So we have this formula here: N is equal to CV, and then N is the moles, C is concentration, and then V is for what? For volume. So if we want to create or to formulate a formula for concentration, you can simply make C the subject of formula by dividing both sides by V. Therefore, it is now N over V being equal to C. So concentration is equal to moles over volume. So this leaves option A is our correct answer. So option B is wrong, option C is wrong, and option D is wrong.